and welcome to another edition of the Stogie video review. By now, I am Walt, and I am one of the co-founders of StogieReview.com, where we do a large number of cigar reviews throughout the week. This video is no different. I'm smoking a cigar that I picked up in Vegas at IPCPR, and unfortunately I don't have a whole lot of information about the cigar. It seems that it may be a new brand, and their company website is very lacking as far as detailed information goes. At the trade show, I managed to get one sample of most cigars, and I was sort of digging around last night trying to figure out what I was going to do with all these single cigars. For these video reviews, I like to do at least 3 cigars, 2-3 cigars, you know, on average. And only having one, it makes it really tough to do a review on them, being that there's a large possibility that I could either get the exceptional cigar of the bunch or just the dud. So to try to avoid that, we try to smoke 2-3 cigars on average and do the review based on those. So I've got one of a lot of these cigars, and I'm not quite sure what to do with them all. And I was digging around, and I happened to find one particular cigar that I had 2 of, and from the looks of it, I must have gotten it from 2 different booths. The first one I smoked was given to me loose. I know that because I put it in a 5-finger bag with a bunch of other cigars that I know that were handed to me loosely. And I also have this box from the folks at Devil's Weed. They had a booth set up, and inside this box are 4 different brands. They're Flor De Cesar, which I'm smoking today, Devil's Weed, Pinar del Rio, or PDR as a lot of people are calling them, and Don Leoncio, I guess that's how you pronounce it, Fabrica de Tabacos. And there's a little bit of a story on the back, which I just happened to see just now. But anyway, inside this box is the cigar that I'm going to be smoking, which is the Flor De Cesar Red Label. Now, I did the write-up ahead of time, and I did a little bit of research on the brand. And Flor De Cesar does have a website, and they have 3 lines available. There's a red, a black, and a green. And there's a difference between, but I don't have that in the notes. There is no size information on the website, so I'm assuming that this is a Robusto, 5x50. Now on the website, it gets quite confusing as far as the wrapper goes. Now, you know what? Before I get into that, let's go over the visual characteristics of the cigar. That way I can tell you this stuff as I'm cutting and lighting, and I can shave a little bit of time off the video. So, the cigar's got medium aroma. It's got almost a little bit of a spicy note to it on the wrapper. Same on the foot. The wrapper leaf itself looks very nice, and then I had the same thing with the one I smoked previously. It's got a nice reddish tone to it. The lines look very clean. The veins are small, dainty. It's got a smooth feel to it, just kind of handling it. Just like my sample yesterday, it is very firm. And I'm not finding any soft spots, but it's very firm. It actually feels hard. And just like my previous sample, everything looks good except for the cap. Looks a little bit sloppy. But again, that's not really a problem. Just one thing I mean, yesterday's cigar looked fantastic with the exception of the cap, and I've got pretty much the same thing today. You know, cigar looks good. No obvious defects standing out. So with that said, let's get the cigar cut and lit. Now, because of how hard the cigar is, I really am expecting it to have a stiff draw. At least my sample yesterday did. So we're going to assume for a stiff draw simply because of the way it felt. Feeling like it was really packed with tobacco. And yeah, pretty much just as I expected. Draws fairly stiff. It's got sort of a very mild fruity flavor on the cold draw. Okay. So now that you know that what the cigar looks like, and all that good stuff. Let's talk about what I saw on the website. Now, on the Flor De Cesar website, there are two things. There's a history on the brand, and there's a breakdown on the cigar. Two separate pages. On one page, it describes the wrapper as a Dominican Maduro wrapper, and on another page, it calls it out as a U.S.-grown Maduro wrapper. You know, the only Maduro wrapper that comes to mind from the United States is Connecticut broadleaf. Now, I may be mistaken, but that's the only one that I can think of, and this certainly does not look like a Connecticut broadleaf wrapper. It's kind of red for that. It's not dark enough, and it doesn't look rugged enough. You know, Connecticut broadleaf wrappers tend to have fairly heavy veins. They just have this rugged appearance to them, which this cigar does not. So of the descriptors, I think the Dominican Maduro wrapper would be the correct one, but again, I'm no expert, just basing that off of personal opinion. Binder is Dominican, filler is a mixture of Dominican and Nicaraguan tobaccos, and this originates in the Dominican Republic. The price point is not available on their website, and their retailer's list is empty, completely empty. So I really have no idea what this cigar costs. And one of the interesting things about the brand is it's based out of Philadelphia, in an area that I'm familiar with, Germantown Avenue in Philadelphia. That's where their headquarters are. Their factory is obviously in the Dominican Republic because that's where the origin of the cigar is. But there's just not a whole lot of information as far as company history and this cigar itself. So with all that said, I've got my cigar lit. It's burning evenly, producing a fair amount of smoke. And well, I'm gonna get the smoke of my cigar a little bit. I'll be back, and we'll get started on the cigar. Well, welcome back, and as you can see, I'm plugging right along on my Flor De Cesar red label, and it's burning very, very well. I'm a little paranoid over the laptop, that's why I'm going to knock it off. But last night the ash held on for quite a while before forcefully being removed. You know, I took a good tap, the ash would come off and sort of plop in the bottom of the ashtray and stay in one chunk, just like it did there. The shape is very compact. It's light colored, firm. It holds on very well. The burn line is just mildly wavy. Not a problem at all, or at least something that I would consider a problem. Burn rate is pretty good. I've been at this for about a half an hour now, and you know, I'm pretty happy with the cigar. Now, initially when I first saw the cigar, I didn't have very high hopes for it, simply because at the trade show I smoked a lot of things that I had never heard of, that just didn't ring a bell when I read the name, and they were just pretty bad cigars. There were several of them. So anything that I smoked at the trade show that I didn't have any background info on, or I had never seen before, or never heard anyone ever mention, you know, I sort of had low expectations for it. And you know, this cigar is turning out very well. It has exceeded my expectations by leaps and bounds already, by being enjoyable. So now that I'm into the first third, the body is it started off mild to medium. A good half dozen puffs into the cigar, you see a dramatic change. It just sort of jumps from mild to medium to the upper levels of medium. The finish is smooth, easy on the palate, gives you that really thick sort of feel in the mouth, like you're sort of smacking your lips and it's difficult to talk a little bit. You know, those really thick cigars. If you ever had one, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It just feels syrupy, sort of thick coating on the walls of your mouth. Now, after a few minutes, this very thick feel subsides, and a sip of water just takes it away completely. But as soon as you get another 2-3 puffs into the cigar, you just get this thick, heavy feel back on the palate once again. And it's not overpowering or too much. It's not bad. It's just it's awkward. You know, it's not something I get very often. Doing a little bit too much talking, or too little puffing, I should say. So I'm going to touch my cigar up for the first time. And while I'm saying that, the flavor profile is very interesting. I'm getting a mild fruity flavor out of the cigar. That it doesn't have much sweetness, but it's just a nice, smooth, fruity flavor. Now, I'm also getting flavors of leather and spice, and they're sort of intermittent. One comes on very dominant, the fruity flavor. You know, that flavor, as soon as that flavor starts to subside, the leather comes in, and as soon as the leather starts to subside, I'm getting, what did I say? Leather and spice, I think? I'm trying to multitask and do one too many things, it seems. Yeah, spice. I thought I remember what I said. So as soon as the leather starts to fade, you get this spice that comes on, and you also get this spice through the sinuses when you sort of retrohale the smoke. Now it's sort of a tiered system. The fruity flavor is sort of dominant, and then you step down to the leather, and then you step down to the spice. So the flavor just reduces as time goes on. Now, the one downside about this cigar is that retrohaling part that I mentioned. Inadvertently, I do this quite a bit when I smoke. Every so often, I just, without realizing it, push the smoke to the back of my mouth and then force it up and through the sinuses and out the nose. And while I'm doing that, I'm starting to get a scratchy throat, and it was one of the things that I made lots of notes on looking at yesterday when I had my first cigar. You know, and at first I thought, well, you know, it might be, you know, instead of a cold or something, maybe some allergies or something are coming on, but it definitely seems to be from the tobacco, because it's scratchy as soon as I sort of swirl the smoke around like that. And after yesterday's cigar, I was finished with it, that scratchy throat went away. So it leads me to think that it's either a little bit of tobacco that's a little rough, a little edgy, or it's just that the cigar needs to spend a little more time aging. And not a whole lot of time, obviously, but it's just a minor irritant to my throat, and that's the only downside of the cigar. It's the only thing that's hindering its performance. So all in all, you know, I'm enjoying it so far. It's exceeded my expectations already, and I'm just going to keep on smoking. I'll be back. We'll do the second, third. And in the meantime, you can check out some pictures of the Flor De Cesar red label, and listen to a little music courtesy of PodSafeMusicNetwork.com. Well, welcome back. I'm still plugging along on my Flor De Cesar red label, and everything's going very well, with one exception, and that is that I still got that little bit of a twinge in the back of my throat, and it worsens the more I retrohale. And I tried stopping, but it's I don't know, it's like forcefully stopping yourself from doing, you know, this habit that you have. You find yourself really struggling not to do it, and I just found that I was enjoying the cigar less that way. So I'll deal with the minor scratchy throat and just keep soldiering forward with the cigar. Now, in terms of body, the cigar seems to have plateaued from its initial jump into the high medium range. The finish is still very thick, but it's not quite as thick as it was earlier on. It's starting to thin out. I can still feel myself smacking my lips because of the thick texture, but it's easy on the palate. It's not abusive or too rough, or it's not unenjoyable. It's just a little awkward or strange. I'm not quite accustomed to getting this sort of film-like texture in the mouth. But again, it's not too bad. The flavors are changing up a little bit, and they're becoming very interesting. The fruity flavor that I was getting earlier on seems to have developed into more of a sort of a red wine flavor, and I think that now it has much more complexity and character than it did when it just had this fruity flavor. It lacked sweetness. It's starting to get a little more sweetness now. It's just got this very nice, smooth red wine flavor that I'm enjoying very much. Now the leather and spice seem to be tapering off, and they're being replaced by flavors of black pepper, especially when the smokes pass through the sinuses. Again, I'm getting a little bit of a twinge in the back of my throat when I do that, but it's producing a very nice black pepper aroma through the nose and whatnot. So I think the cigar has got lots of complexity. It's got lots of character. I'm enjoying it very much. With the only downside being that it's got something in it that's just irritating my throat a little bit, and it's just my throat. It's not my sinuses or anything like that. It's just sort of a scratchy throat. And again, when I had my first sample, the exact same thing happened. I'm not exhibiting any signs of allergies or a cold or anything like that. So I know it's most definitely coming from the cigar, and I'm not coming down with something. So again, all in all, the cigar is going very well, and I'm happy with it. Burn line seems to have straightened up a little bit. It's still got a minor wave. The ash color is very light. It looks very nice as well. It looks like this sort of like a solid chunk of almost like limestone with cracks in it. Dark cracks, which is very interesting to me. It's one of the things of the smoking experience I pay a lot of attention to is the ash for whatever reason. I just find it interesting to be able to look at the ash and see where the veins were and see where any defects might have been, and and look at the end and see the color and see the variations in color, looking right on at the foot, seeing where the Ligero was, where it wasn't, and where the different tobaccos may have been. It just sort of rounds out the whole experience for me, and I find it interesting. Now, as I mentioned, there's very little information about this cigar on the company website, which is Flor De Cesar, Cesar.com. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, and probably way too much glare. But at any rate, you can head over there if you want to check out the company in itself. The retail page is blank, so you're not going to be able to find a person which will sell you these. You may be able to contact them direct and ask for information. I would have done that. Unfortunately, I've got an extremely busy week, and I'm recording this on the day that I would like, but I'll be editing it tonight rather than tomorrow, so everything is just sort of rushed through, or not so much rushing through the video, but once it gets done, I have a lot of stuff to accomplish so that we can record YQMA tomorrow with Brian and Jerry. So it's just a lot of things are up in the air right now, and I'm trying to get this done, and I really didn't have time to contact the manufacturer and ask for specifics, although I would have liked to. And I've got a black label. I've only got one, but I'll see what I can do. Maybe I can get some information, and we'll do sort of a first impression review on the cigar, or maybe one of those quick things, and see how it works. But I'm not comfortable doing a full-blown review on a single cigar, so we'll just have to play it by ear and see how it goes. But with that said, relax, enjoy whatever you're smoking, and I'll be back. We'll do the final third and wrap this thing up.
till midnight on that westbound Greyhound. Took the invitation.
Well, welcome back. And before I forget to tell you once again, my apologies for the audio issues in the beginning of the video. Apparently, what happened was the connection from my shotgun mic to the camcorder must have had a little bit of dirt in there. I pulled them apart, cleaned them, put them back together, and now everything just seems to be working fine. So there shouldn't be any more issues with in and out audio throughout, at least this video anyway. So that's just another reason why I should definitely double check the audio before I click record. But you know, I'm still working on my Flor De Cesar, and I think I'm saying that right, or at least I hope I am. And everything's going pretty well. I've been at this, I'm probably a little more than an hour and a half into the cigar now, and I removed the band about 15, maybe 20 minutes ago. Now, in terms of body, the cigar still seems to have hit this plateau. There was an initial jump in the first third up into the higher medium spectrum, and it's just sort of lingered there. It hasn't gone up or down. No noticeable change throughout the remainder of the cigar. That really thick feeling that I was getting, almost like a film coating the inside of my mouth, is much less now. It doesn't feel nearly as heavy as it did. No problems with feeling like I'm smacking my lips or anything like that. Finish is easy on the palate. I'm still getting a scratchy throat, and I'm just convinced it is the cigar and nothing else. It sort of irritates it when I retrohale, and then it subsides. Take a sip of water, subsides, and then take another puff on the cigar, and irritation again. It's a minor irritant. It's not really bad, but it is pulling the cigar down a little bit. If this weren't here, I think I'd be enjoying the cigar much more than I already am. Now, I don't have a tremendous amount of information to report on the flavors of the cigar. They haven't changed a whole lot. The red wine flavor is still there. It's very enjoyable. It seems to have become a little crisper, a little more complex as I've gone throughout, richer. Just all in all, a very enjoyable flavor. I'm just touching up my cigar a little bit. I'm not puffing on it nearly enough, it seems. And there was a black pepper flavor in there in the last third that started to take over the other flavors of leather and spice. In the last third, the black pepper flavor sort of subsides, and there's just sort of a montage of black pepper, leather, spice, and a really rich sort of coffee flavor that comes in and out. And all in all, it makes for a very dynamic flavor. It's very interesting, and I'm enjoying it quite a bit. Now, overall, as I said, I didn't have very high hopes for the cigar, and it's a classic case of you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, but there were a handful of pretty lousy cigars at IPCPR. The one that I remember the most, and the name alone should have just, made me think otherwise, was this cigar called the Naughty Goose. I lit it up after having God knows how many cigars that day, walking around the trade show floor, and I ended up putting it out less than halfway through it. It was pretty rough. Actually, if you heard the interview I did with Doc Stogie Fresh, that was a cigar I pitched in the ashtray right before the interview. And even with a desensitized palate from that many cigars, it was just really rough and too much for me. And that was a prime example of these no-name cigars that could go either way. Here's a cigar I've never heard of before. It did very, very well. I enjoyed it very much, with the exception of the scratchy throat. And as I said, I didn't have very high expectations of it, but it certainly proved me wrong, and I'm happy to have smoked it. Flavors are interesting from start to finish. It's very dynamic. It's interesting. Kept my attention throughout. And cigar burned very well. The ash looked great. Burn line is good. Burn rate is, as I said, I'm a little over an hour and a half into the cigar now, and that's about on par for a Robusto. But I've probably got another 25 minutes left or so. So I'm going to get quite a bit of time out of the cigar. It's packed. The draw is a little firm, but again, I think that's from just so much tobacco being in there. It may be a little overfilled, if anything. But all in all, the volume of smoke is decent. The density of the smoke is good. It's not harsh or abusive. It doesn't linger around the room too much. You know, I've got the window closed, and there's not much of a smoke cloud in here, surprisingly, and I'm not finding it very offensive. So all in all, I was pretty happy about smoking the cigar. Now, unfortunately, as I had mentioned earlier, there's very little information on the website. So if you want to track this cigar down, it's going to be a little bit of work. My only suggestion would be to contact the company direct if you're looking to try this cigar at flordecesar.com and contact the brand owner and see if he can direct you to a retailer. Being in the Philadelphia area, don't quote me on this, but there are several of you that enjoyed the top shelf reviews that I did of the Black Label, the Black, Blue, and Red, and those come from Top Shelf Cigars and Skip Pack. The owner's name is Jim Cronin. Being that this company is not far from his shop, there is a possibility he may carry it. So if you're familiar with Jim and you've ordered his cigars before, which I know several of you have, you may be able to call up Jim and see if he carries it, if he's heard of it, if he can give you any more information. If not, you can go direct to the retailer or direct to the manufacturer and see if they can help you out. But at this point, there's just no information on the website that's very useful as far as tracking the cigars down. So with that said, I'm not quite sure what's coming up next week. I know I say that every week, and I really should start making a list. I've got quite a few things going on. I've got some samples coming from Duke Cigars, which is one of our sponsors. He wants me to review one of the cigars he carries. I'm not sure what it is. I just know it's going to show up, and that may be next week. If you're a member of our fan forums, if you keep an eye on the What Have You Been Smoking thread, I usually drop a note in there as to what I'm smoking for such and such. For instance, it's been a little while since I posted in there, but I mentioned that I was smoking, what was I smoking? One of the Isle de Cuba cigars for the review, and I think I did that a couple weeks in a row. So there's one place you can sort of track it down, and you become a registered user of the forum and help build the community. So it's a win-win either way. But with all that said, I'm about done here, so until next week, happy smoking.